Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm thrilled you're here because if you're in procurement or supply chain, you already know tariffs aren't just a line item anymore, they're a moving target. Today's topic, decoding tariff impact, how to pinpoint cost and risk. We're going beyond the headlines, no panic, no guesswork, just real strategies to help you understand how tariffs are impacting your landed costs and how you can push back with data when suppliers raise costs and prices. Joining us are two experts who know how to navigate this chaos. Rahul Tiwari, Director at GEP and Transformation Leader in Supply Chain Strategy, and Karen Kumar, Senior Director at GEP, who specializes in building future-ready procurement strategies. They'll break down GEP's 5-step tariff assessment framework, a practical, no-fluff approach to isolate tariff-driven cost increases and make smarter sourcing decisions. If you've got questions, drop them in the chat and we'll get to them live. So let's get into it. Let's start off with Karen. Why is it important right now for companies to be paying attention to the ever-changing tariffs?
So, globalization over the past 25 years has remade supply chains across services and goods sectors. We've seen a huge network of cross-border goods and services flowing that have brought us this efficient global economy. And that's now been upended with tariffs. So in order for us to deal with that, it's important to pay attention to tariffs.
Yep. And I would like to add, Alexandra, to my colleague's point, tariffs is something that has more immediate impact. Traditionally, supply chains and trends that have impacted supply chains have had a longer lead time to respond to. People would step up their capabilities, they would stand up their talent pool to react to it, whereas tariffs is something that's very time sensitive. It impacts stuff that's on water, it impacts stuff that's ready at the manufacturers, and there's very little time to make supply chain network changes, which makes it even more important and time sensitive for our clients to react to sooner than later.
And I'd add to that we're already in an inflationary environment. In the initial days post-COVID, we saw immense monetary support across developed economies and some previously unheard of support for struggling populations in the form of unemployment assistance and direct cash transfers. The savings rate ticked up far beyond the historical norm in the US as well. And all that to say, companies were able to pass on price increases to their consumers due to price pressures rather easily without much in the form of consumer revolt. And if you look at cumulative consumer price index inflation across developed economies since then, it's been far above what we've seen in the decade prior to COVID, where goods inflation was essentially kept under check through globalization. So all that to say, the consumer's ability to absorb inflation is really being tested. Premium retailers have reported losing consumers to lower cost alternatives. Global FMCG majors have reported running out of pricing power. And throwing tariff fuel on top of this cumulative inflation has left large firms faced with some very difficult decisions from a pricing perspective. Additionally, in this environment, doing better than your competitors in mitigating tariff-related cost increases, assessing alternatives, and thoughtfully sharing the burden across suppliers, the consumers, and your margins can be a major strategic advantage. Tariffs also serve as an opportunity to reevaluate the geographical mix of your supply base, where in calmer times, you might have chosen to continue with the status quo. Tariffs pose risks not just from a cost standpoint, but an availability standpoint as well. So active managers of tariff risks are winning because they're asking themselves, how can they secure inputs in the right place versus focusing solely on haggling with their supply chain and trying to get them to bear the cost.
Yeah. And as Karan mentioned, risks, right? Tariffs have come up to be a litmus test for your existing supply chain resilience or flexibility for that matter. There have been instances where past sourcing and supply chain decisions were unquestionable, at least from tariff standpoint, because it was always one of the pieces of paper that would get signed up as part of the contract where people focused on so many more other things. But now, understanding the impact of changing tariffs and its implications on product cost has put some of the risk management strategies to test, which makes it more important to understand tariff exposure for that matter.
And I think flexibility will remain the key going forward as well. Tariffs were implemented in 2017 as well, and while they weren't as disruptive to the broad economy at that point, ask anyone in the affected sectors, and they will tell you that adjustment to the new reality took a while even back then. The current round of tariffs are obviously far broader, more complex, and have tended to be volatile. If you don't know what the impact of a given tariff increase is to your supply chain, finding alternatives and getting set up to deal with continued volatility is always going to be a bridge too far. We also saw some firms react more nonchalantly to the tariffs in the second quarter this year. They expected trade deals to be signed or elimination of tariffs, or they were expecting tariffs to be negotiated down. While some of that has materialized, the broad based nature of the tariffs has severely disadvantaged passive managers of this risk against their active counterparts. So we definitely recommend firms to take an active role in management of their supply chain, through these tariffs, because passive firms will definitely lose.
Okay, those were some really important points. Thank you guys for clearing some of that up. Rahul, on to you. What are the benefits of assessing tariff impact?
No, that's a good one, Alexandra. And we get asked this question from our clients more often than less, right? And our answer differs. It depends on what the enterprise is set up to do. If we were to look at it the most easiest way, business to business and business to customers, B2C, B2B, the way normally people talk about it, the benefits are varied, right? When you talk about a B2B setup, the number one thing that it helps our clients do is protect their margins. Tariff is something that's incurred at second or even third or even some, and most obviously the first tier of suppliers, which eventually impacts a businesses or an enterprise's margin as well. So assessing the tariff impact helps distribute this impact across the entities involved, because there's much less scope to go with price hikes given a B2B setup that they have. The second thing that we have seen, as Karan mentioned earlier, there have been inflationary pressures, there have been distressed suppliers for quite some time. Since COVID times, we all saw businesses filing for bankruptcy, going through disruptions, doing divestitures and whatnot. And when these distressed suppliers get impacted by tariffs, that's when they pretty much go back to the verge of filing for bankruptcy, or even worse, changing their entire network and supply portfolio. To prevent that and to inform their innovation and R&D pipeline, understanding the tariff impact becomes even more critical and beneficial, not just for our clients, but for the tier one suppliers as well. Another reason why it has been benefiting the B2B clients that we have is from the aspect of exploring new markets. Once you know your country of origins, once you know which areas of your products or suppliers are getting impacted most, it becomes easy for you to enter markets and explore markets. We've seen a lot of this happening in Southeast Asia and even Europe for that matter. But exploring these new markets and making informed decisions has become critical and beneficial for a lot of the clients that Karan and I serve.
And I think assessing alternative specifications is also one of the opportunities that we're seeing clients explore at this stage. Some of our clients pre-COVID especially would balk at higher order value generation through sourcing. So more complex but rewarding strategies such as SKU rationalization and demand management always took a backseat to price-based negotiations and supplier mix conversations, since those lower order levers presented enough opportunities to manage costs lower, within that environment. Post-COVID, a lot of those same clients came to the realization that simply, looking at every possible strategy was the only way forward, even if that meant increased cross-functional collaboration, which they were sometimes averse to. They realized that price negotiations would not get the job done and that higher order levers needed to be looked at seriously to maintain cost discipline. One of our top retail clients in the US, for example, had built up a bewildering complexity in their packaging buys post COVID, because during COVID, you were buying whatever you could get your hands on that got the job done. The proliferation of SKUs on catalogs and the resulting undercutting of scale advantages was hurting them on the prices they paid. And we spent a lot of time in thoughtfully slimming down those catalogs to, a fifth of what they were. So while tariffs might be unwelcome for most businesses, they also present a huge opportunity to willing organizations, those that actively hunt for alternative solutions, not just geographically, but in fundamentally questioning their own requirements across the goods and services they buy. I think firms that are able to use this as an opportunity will really thrive in the immediate future.
Yeah. And then switching over to businesses that directly serve clients, right? Like Karan gave them an example of retailers, and not to mention there are so many others that directly serve customers. For them, the biggest benefit is to control the transfer of price that they give, the price hike that they give to their customers. It has very direct implications on the spending capacity. We have seen that during COVID. We see that when interest rates get hiked up in US economy and suddenly people stop spending the way they would, right? With the anticipation that, it'll all come down, but tariff is here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. And to mitigate the impact on price increases is something that can only be done if you truly understand how to calculate, what to calculate, who to work with, and what sources of data to look at, not only to ensure customer loyalty, but also to maintain market share across your product categories, right? Now, when you think about it in this space from surcharges standpoint, it is something for those of us who are supply chain procurement experts. Surcharges in supply chain is known to happen during peak demand season. We just had our back to school happen right now. We're going to go into a very good holiday season, which has very strong positive speculation on it being a successful one. And that's when capacity constraints become an issue. And once there are countries that have since then established themselves to be an alternate source, you need to contain those charges, and for that matter, those peak season charges, to ensure that you're not kind of going into those decisions. Some of the clients that we have, they have already started, stockpiling or pre-ordering products to ensure that, hey, we don't hit those surcharges like we always do this year, because we have one less source now than we used to before. Which is another benefit of knowing what your surcharges and what your tariff implications are going to be. Last but not the least, this mode of business has significant revenue loss risks. For example, if you raise your price hikes, if you change your product mix, it doesn't take too long for them to switch from either one online service provider to another store that they need to go down to. We heard that between Amazon, Temu. We heard that we're in quite a few in-store brick and mortar retailers, wherein people have started thinking differently about giving their money for what they have to different competitors in the space. So ensuring that revenue loss is prevented beyond just cost, beyond just supply resilience, is something that a lot of our clients benefit from once they have understood the implications of tariff and its exposure to its customers.
Okay, thank you guys for all that context. That's so important to know. On to the next one, also for you, Rahul. What are some highlights of the process that we laid out?
Sure. I think when Karan and I were writing this paper and considering all the questions that we received from our clients, we truly felt the need to establish three very strong principles in our paper, right? One was establishing the source of truth. We encountered so many client discussions wherein people were quoting news articles, however reputed and established and time tested they are, publications from supply chain associations and whatnot. So our very first call of duty, if I may, was to ensure that we establish the right source of truth. A lot of this, thankfully so, is publicly available, be it sources from White House, be it where you find your HS codes, be it finding what the tariff rate by country is. And in some cases, it is your supplier incumbent itself who's the only person who can tell you information about what HS codes they are using to import their goods, what tariffs they are exposed to, what is their mitigation strategies and whatnot. So we really wanted to make sure in this paper we call out what are the sources of truth that you should be looking at versus getting distracted by all these publications and speculations that are out there. The second bottleneck that we tried to address through this paper was ensuring that the right cost base is used for tariffs. For those of us who may have researched this, we'll all see percentages flying around that, hey, XYZ country is exposed to 20, 30, 50% tariff, but what does that percentage apply to? And that often changes by country, by product, by what commodity you're talking about. So it's very critical for you to understand and for the readers of the paper to understand what the right base cost is on which those percentage need to be applied and get that validation, confirmation, and whatnot from their supply base. And last but not the least, because this has not been so much of a hot topic, not many people have contractually, or for that matter, as part of their invoice and purchase order process, have bothered to document the right HTS codes for their products. We have established a source of truth for that. We have established what cost base needs to be used for it. But to understand what the HTS code needs to be has become extremely important. The only reason I say that is because there are different suppliers who may be giving you the exact same thing to our clients, but they may be importing it under different HTS codes. And sometimes exemptions to tariffs, of that matter, the percentage of tariff that gets deployed happens at the HTS code level. So for you to understand what the exact HTS code is becomes important, which we tried to highlight in our paper as well, to ensure that there's one source of truth and there's one source of classification that gets allocated.
Okay, that makes sense. Definitely want to make sure you're using the right codes to avoid and paying extra tariffs. All right. And finally, what are the impacts you're seeing with clients?
Sure. I would say that two levels of impact that we are seeing, the short term and the long term ones. The short term, quite obviously, like I mentioned before, it's a good litmus test. We are seeing a good validation of kind of what suppliers that are actively reaching out to our clients for cost increases. I mean, understanding tariff calculations, understanding how well and how they need to be calculated has become a good instrument for our clients to calculate tariff impact, and not to mention validate the asks that the suppliers have, ensuring the transparency of data, the methodology of calculation, the base cost, all the good things that we talked about from a benefit standpoint. So that has become the most immediate impact, where our clients can now stand up and say whether they agree or disagree with the dollar increase that the supplier is asking for. As I mentioned, in cases where price increases are inevitable, a lot of our clients are going after alternate countries of origin where the tariff rates are low, or there's always been credible substitution for their incumbent, or even from dual sourcing standpoint. A lot of us must have heard strategies like China plus one, China plus two, and it's all about, to some extent, identifying an alternate country of origin. And to make those decisions and to make that impact happen, understanding how tariff exposure is being calculated for different countries and different products becomes important. And once you know the impact, it gets easier to establish a partner in an alternate country. Last but not the least, like I mentioned in the instances of where businesses are supplying directly to their customers, there have been, as we all may have seen in the news, a lot of stockpiling decisions that have taken place. People have either pre-ordered their Halloween decorations in stores. People, we know that our clients did pre-order a lot of the school supplies that were coming in for the back-to-school season. And we also know that some of that stockpiling and pre-ordering has also happened for the upcoming Thanksgiving and Christmas seasons that are happening right now. And to make those decisions, to understand where they need to get stockpiled, when they would enter the US borders, when would the inventory hit the water and whatnot, all those decisions eventually have an impact on your cash flow, if not obviously your margins, but which we are seeing as a good benefit that our clients are seeing. Karan, over to you for some long-term benefits we are seeing.
Yeah, I think we're also seeing clients take a more holistic approach to supply relationship management. Long term, it makes supply relationship management more critical. So, as a firm, do you have the ability to invest in your strategic suppliers to ensure they are setting up capacity where you need it? If not through direct investment, are you communicating your needs so you have the ability to some extent, influence their decisions and get access to capacity when and where you need it in the future, assuming, of course, tariffs stay. We're also seeing some creativity in the current time in contract management because let's not forget that the current administration in the US is just in its first year, and all indications are that tariffs are here to stay. It's therefore important to negotiate contracts that are flexible. Volume tiers and indexation of tariffs once you've reached an adequate level of cost transparency with your supply base will allow firms to limit repeated negotiations, which can be a major productivity drag if tariffs remain volatile. Um, and it all starts from having a very clear, objective understanding of your current tariff exposure and impact, as Rahul.
All right. Thank you guys for that very informative conversation. We're going to spend some time on Q&A now. So a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions, go ahead and add them to the chat and we'll try to get to them. So we've already had some coming in. We're going to start with the first one. With so much volatility in global trade, where are companies struggling the most when it comes to understanding their actual tariff exposure?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think the stability of global supply chains, as viewed from the lens of declining weighted average tariff rates over time, coupled with the outsourcing of the core customs compliance process to brokers, has led to a severe shortage of talent and organizational understanding of tariffs just as a trade concept. A lot of our clients have also been hard at work educating themselves with the basics of how tariffs work, which can devolve into whack-a-mole because the number of the volume of tariff-related problems to solve just keeps increasing by the day, while organizations are still struggling with the basics. From a data standpoint, because tariffs have been low for so long, HTS codes, countries of origin, and duty rates are very rarely tracked natively in ERPs. So, building clear visibility of the codes you're exposed to, the current rates of duty that are baked into your P&L and budgets, it's not just a one-click exercise for most firms. That's why bringing in experts to help build visibility while working with your brokers, suppliers, and internal stakeholders is well worth it, especially if, as a leader with cost responsibilities, you've assessed that internal capabilities don't exist or are not nimble enough to get the job done. Not knowing your own current state with respect to tariffs is a sure shot recipe for disaster in the current environment.
Yeah, I would only add to Karan's insights. In my experience, availability of data ensuring that there's transparency of data, be it HTS codes, base costs, country of origin, everything that we have been talking about, has been the biggest challenge that I've seen with my clients that they're struggling with, right? And not to mention on top of it, not having the time and quite honestly the talent at times to conduct the due diligence has been a huge bottleneck with regards to getting through to what reality looks like. Instead, what we have seen is them relying on suppliers to self-report this impact, which hasn't yielded into the best negotiations outcome that one would desire from the supply base.
All right. Thank you both. Next question. How can procurement teams use tariff assessments to validate supplier price increases and push back when they're not justified?
So we're seeing a lot of our clients choose RFIs as the method. RFIs with the appropriately chosen set of impacted suppliers serve as a quick but broad method to capture the necessary information about countries of origin, cost structure, HS code classification, all of which are prerequisites to resolving these issues both in the short term and the long term. We're seeing active managers go to market with thoughtfully designed RFIs that aim to capture as much information as possible from their suppliers, all in one go for internal teams to effectively model and assess the impact. The biggest aim is to understand your supplier's cost structure to the extent confidentiality requirements and constraints will allow. Only a small fraction of supplier contracts are cost plus markup based, so you can't always expect suppliers to share their full cost structure in all its detail. But placing the onus on the supplier to justify cost structure or to justify cost increases based on their cost structure, it naturally provides more clarity and leads to fairer outcomes for everyone involved. Because once you reach the conclusion that tariffs mean price increases, how to fairly absorb that increase across the supplier, the consumer, and your own margins is a question that can only be answered if the supply chain is aligned on the objective truth of what the impact is. If big multinationals are struggling with this, you must also empathize with smaller firms that simply don't have the systems and the firepower to deal with the situation. A lot of times they're operating from a place of fear and anxiety, and impact assessments can bring objectivity to a situation that's understandably gotten emotionally charged on all sides. On a more collaborative note, though, RFIs also serve the purpose of understanding your supply chain's response to tariffs. Are they investing in domestic capacity in the US? Are they investing in nearshore capacity that carries a lower tariff rate than the current state? How long is the queue to access either of those capacity options? How much would it cost? Is there lower pre-tariff, inventory or sorry, I meant lower cost pre-tariff inventory on hand that you could access? Are they looking for volume commitments to share in that capacity? So the tariff assessment will help bring to light a lot of this objective truth, which gives firms the ability to push back on increases when they're not justified.
Okay, on to the next question. How important is accurate country of origin and customs data in managing compliance risk? And how often do companies get it wrong?
Sure. No, that's a good question. I can take that one. So compliance is a very loaded word in the space of supply chain. It is extremely of high importance, be it compliance or be it quality checks that happen across products in this space. In fact, there's an entire industry set up to ensure compliance and related risk mitigation, right? A lot of us must have heard of these importer of record services and custom brokers that thrive on this entire notion of ensuring compliance and ensuring there is adherence to the regulatories and keeping up to date with country specific compliance or regulatory changes. especially in the world of tariffs. There have been conversations about parking goods in one country, shipping it from there, and there are tight regulations around it, whether it's even allowed or whether that even gives you any tariff impact or exposure or not. So I would strongly recommend that one should be careful before entertaining such options that are out there. No matter how and what you put as your country of origin HTS codes, you always, more often than not, get audited by US Customs. And once quote unquote non-compliance is detected, it can lead to heavy financial penalties. There could even be seizure of goods. There could also be allegations of fraud and malpractices that may even go public for that matter, which harms your overall reputation as an enterprise. In my experience, have not seen many companies go wrong with it. But like I mentioned before, with products and goods getting rerouted, with suppliers claiming that they can provide less exposure by shipping from an alternate office that they may have in some other country, I would really advise our clients and everyone out there to be very cautious to before making those decisions, because changes in all of that may or may not exactly warrant a change of country of origin, if I may, or for that matter, the tariff impact as well. And the administration knows this. There have been some articles out there which talks about the federal government being aware that this is a practice that takes place. That's why we, when the first wave of tariff announcements came up, we even saw a tariff imposed on countries where there's barely a living soul. So why would that be happening, right? And that's exactly happening because the administration is aware. There are more stringent and more frequent audits happening right now, and that is why we would strongly recommend to be even more alert, if not before, with regards to ensuring accuracy of country of origin and accuracy of all the customs data that needs to be printed or labeled on the products.
And I think, given that reciprocal tariffs are country specific, the short answer is the country of origin transparency is of paramount importance. We've seen suppliers trying to pass off price increases to our clients, even though their existing contracts don't specify a country of origin for inputs they use to sell products manufactured in the US, or in cases where distributors are importing finished goods. Now, that doesn't in and of itself imply trade non-compliance, so I want to be absolutely clear about that. But having this information transparently shared between buyers and sellers and having this be reflected in contracts in no uncertain terms allows for fairer adjustment in the future if needed. And it's not as easy as it might seem to get this right. I think from primary to secondary and tertiary suppliers, uh, the countries of origin can start to stack up for seemingly simple products. Um, I do also want to give a shout out here to customs brokers. We've seen that the best customs brokers are really stepping up their game for their customers right now. What used to be a sleepy corner of global logistics is suddenly very active. So the expertise in custom reporting they are providing can give you a leg up. Where you are not the direct importer of record, things can get harder to enforce though. But again, the same tenets of increased transparency around cost structure, country of origin visibility, and HTS classifications go a long way in driving fair and stable outcomes with suppliers. I can't comment on how often companies get it wrong, but I can tell you what the consequences are. I think Rahul hinted at some of those financial penalties, delays in customs clearance, which can throw off inventory planning in an already volatile supply chain environment, potential seizure and destruction of goods for repeat violations, and increased scrutiny on future shipments that can lead to a vicious cycle of slowing inventory turns and higher input costs. So even if to ensure nothing other than compliance to the new tariffs, we see impact assessment as a necessary first step in avoiding bad outcomes, aside from all the other benefits that we've discussed today.
Okay, and we've got time for one more question. In what ways can tariff data shape smarter sourcing decisions, such as switching suppliers, rerouting logistics, or adjusting contracts?
Certainly, in all of those ways, I'd say arbitrage will find its way into the system. Sellers will find their optimal buyers, and vice versa. It's a question of speed in the short term and flexibility in the mid to long term. You need to act with speed and urgency in the short term because the lowest cost alternatives are being taken up by your competitors as we speak. Cultivating relationships with alternatives domestically and nearshore that could form your post-tariff supply chain will be harder to do the longer you wait to make those connections. Rerouting logistics is a problem that's downstream of the choice of supplier, at least in products with high density freight. Ocean carriers, trucking companies will all respond with choices that protect their margins to match the new reality that's forming. So in some ways, I see that as a problem to solve. Once you've identified how your supplier mix needs to evolve. In terms of adjusting contracts, we mentioned indexation earlier. I think we're seeing a lot more indexation and volume tiering to account for the increased range of potential outcomes, even in supply contracts that have seen stable volumes in the past. So everyone recognizes that flexible language that allows for formulaic adjustment based on jointly accepted cost structure realities, or the ability to renegotiate as the reality around tariffs evolves, is pretty key because as we've all seen through the better part of the last 4 to 6 months, tariffs have moved around quite a bit, and planning for that through an assessment is certainly well worth everyone's time.
All right. Thank you both so much for your expertise. That was all the time we had for today. If you asked a question that we didn't get to, we will be following up with you with that answer. We will also be sending out a recording of this LinkedIn Live session. We have our upcoming GEP Innovate event this fall. To learn more about it, go to gep.com. Thank you all for your time today, and everybody have a productive and a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.